So what we do in the beginning for people who are new is um, we tend to do like a quick like lecture in the beginning, just so we can wait for some people to arrive, and then we get started and we field some questions, and I ask people kind of at random to field some questions. We pause them in the mid between reading the prompt and reading the investigating, facts and details that we notice, and then we answer and then read the explanations and talk about why the answer is the answer. Um, so why don't we jump into a lecture, and then I'll explain a little bit more about that. But before I do, um, so I'm just going to take a quick roll call, and then we'll do like a even quicker roll call after the lecture. But Marcella, are you here?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Okay. Good. All right. Good to see you. Where are you coming from, Marcelo?
I am from Bolivia.
Bolivia.
Uh,
Okay. All right. Well,
Bolivia.
I'm in Brazil right now, so I'm a little closer to Bolivia than I usually would be.
Yes, yes,
So
it's close.
yes. So you're very welcome. Um, and Hassan, are you here today?
Yeah,
Okay.
hello.
Welcome. So where are you coming from?
Egypt.
Egypt. All right. Right. All right. How long have you been preparing for STEP?
Maybe a half a year.
Half a year. Okay. Yeah. So that's I think that's very typical. I think we have a lot of students who've been preparing for a year and a half or 2 years. Um, and so thank you for coming. Miriam, are you here? Is your mic working? I know Miriam from many of the sessions as well. So are you here, Miriam? All right. I think Miriam's gonna rejoin. What I do, guys, is I ask that people actually do turn on their camera just because it's more engaging for people to watch the whole lecture. And at least I want to be able to make contact with you and ask you questions, and just like in audio, just talk to you guys. Um, so what I don't do is like kick anybody out. But there's a waiting room, and what you do is you just to join again, you get admitted right away, and then we just test your mic and go from there. Just because the reason for the lectures, in addition to teaching people, is just to engage with people from all over the world who are preparing for the USMLE, and when some people are answering questions and some people aren't, I feel like it encourages the people to speak up and be confident when they're answering questions that everybody's going to get a turn to be on the stage. So Miriam, I'm just going to not going to kick you out at all. I'm just going to put you in the waiting room, and we'll see you soon. I'm sure people just log in out when we start at 11:05. But so today's a little different because usually I teach USMLE knowledge that is substantive, meaning that it's on the list, the official list for the USMLE content. Um, today the lecture is a little different because um, I think this is like one of those crucial skills that just nobody teaches anyone. And there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of ways to, they say, skin a cat in the states, which is kind of a super morbid way to say it. But this I've made this beautiful drawing here. Um, this is a. Can you guys see this? Can you guys see my beautiful Marcella? Are you able to see this? Maybe not. Let me see. Screen share. Is this visible?
Yes, yes, I can see it.
Oh, good, good. Okay. So the idea behind this drawing is pretty simple. I'm calling it the taxonomy of a question. So in USMLE, you're going to get vignette style questions, right? So there's a lot of there's a lot that goes into that. Um, uh, Vignette style question is not going to be like a normal multiple choice question where you can use um, quite all of the strategies that you would use on a multiple choice exam uh, um, that has a short prompt and answer choices which are straightforward and an obviously correct one answer choice. A vignette style question in the USMLE is going to have several reasonable answers. It's going to have a much longer prompt. It's going to have lab values that it can give you. It's really trying to give you confidence in the wrong answer in a sense. It's not trying to do that. There will be definitively be a one answer choice that objectively, given the USMLE content, should be the correct answer, and a even a mildly reasonably intelligent person who knows everything that's going to be on the exam should be able to pick out the correct answer choice every time without thinking deeply about it. So if you are struggling and you're saying to yourself, I don't know, this seems ambiguous, this seems hard to decide what the answer choice is, don't blame don't blame the question. Try to think about what facts have been provided to you, because there will be about 6 or 7 people who pored over that question and edited it and vetted that question to ensure that there is a one objectively true correct answer. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but I would assume that for the exam because it's a healthy way to do it. For step one, especially, um, the taxonomy of the vignette style question, I've broken it down into several categories. So let me just explain what these numbers represent, and then we'll get started on talking about why I think this order of looking at the question can be really useful. Uh, this isn't the only way to do it. There's lots of ways to do it. This is the way that I do it, and I'm just sharing one data point. And necessarily like a typical learner or anything like that. I just think that if you never see someone break it down and talk about how they do it, especially when you're starting out, and if you're studying alone, if you're not studying with people from the United States who talk about this and build their knowledge amongst one another on forums for months and months, then you might miss out on something crucial. So this number one, I've put the number one as one line here. Um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is just the sentence that ends with a question mark. So this is the sentence that if you were to go from the question mark and just scroll backwards to the next period in the sentence, this would be the sentence that says, what is the most likely diagnosis, or what risk factor is associated with this diagnosis, or what treatment is associated with this diagnosis. And so that question sentence is very crucial to framing everything else in the question. It's the most crucial piece of information. It's what are they asking? Because there's going to be information in this paragraph that is 110% useless. There's going to be information that says that their bilirubin is within normal range. There's going to be information. It's not completely useless, but there's going to be, it's going to be a psychiatric question. It's going to be a drug that isn't hepatotoxic. It's not referencing any drugs that have adverse effects that affect the liver, but it's going to talk to you about bilirubin. It's going to give you information that you don't need. So if you don't read the question and typify what type of question it is, and kind of decide what category of knowledge, meaning is this respiratory, is this cardiovascular, I think you run the risk of mischaracterizing the question and then mischaracterizing the answer choices, and that can be a big problem. So I like to start on basic principles. I want to read the question sentence because I want to know what they're asking. Sayeda and Miriam here. So let's talk about what you do after the question sentence. So after the question sentence, you might get a feeling like this is hello Sayeda and Miriam. I can hear.
Hi, I can hear you too.
All right, welcome. All right, good to see you again. Um, so, um, so the question, what I was talking about is kind of the taxonomy of questions and how you can break it down. So this is one, two, three, four, five, and this is the question sentence. So I always look at the question sentence first, and then I go to the answer choices actually after that, because what I'm really after, the pursuit that I have throughout a question is to decide what what type of content is this, and what is the nature of the answer choices, in what is the learning objective, what is the thing that they're trying to teach me. Can I approximate this question to be about an image? Can I approximate this question to be about the question sentence alone and just choose the answer and move on? Because I'm trying to win time in addition to answering the question correctly. And so the sooner I know what kind of question this is, the better I am able to read three, four, and five. I think three, four, and five are very difficult to understand. And you can certainly run the risk of spending this is the taxonomy of a question on step one, by the way. I wouldn't necessarily read it this way for step two. Some people go back another sentence and read a sentence preceding the question sentence before they even go to the answer choices, or they go back to the top and read the question. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and I would think a lot about this and write your own version of this if you want to really understand what's right for you. This is how people improve their score. They say I've been plateauing. I got like a one. I'm at 194, and I'd like to improve my score to be 210 or 250. How do I do that? Testing strategies are the fastest way to improve something like 12 points on the exam, or even more. So you go from the question sentence, you go to the answer choices, and what you're really asking yourself when you go to the answer choices right now is a really quick glance. You want to say to yourself, what is true about all of these answer choices? What can I say? Is this like you're going to see a bunch of drugs and you say, oh, these are drugs with adverse effects, or these are drugs that cause pedal edema or hypertension, or these are antihypertensives, or what have you. So you want to quickly kind of characterize what these answer choices are, because now you know what the question's asking and you know what kind of question it is. You don't want to be paying attention to all the numbers that are mentioned in a research question when you know that it's just going to ask you what kind of experiment this is. Like, this is a great example. Like, this is a, um, this is a double blind study, or a cohort, or a cross sectional, so you really want to like rule out the possibility that you need to pay attention to details that can waste time on the exam. Then you go up to the top, and potentially this is like not a research question. Potentially this is like a question where you have a patient where they have an age and a gender and a kind of presentation that you can pay attention to. So you don't want to go that far. You just want to start with what is their you know gender, and what is their age, and just start with like, okay, this is a 43-year-old female. Okay, well, that changes a lot about what it could be. Uh, it could be something to do with pregnancy. It could be something that is more common in women, like breast cancer, or um, it could be a genitourinary problem. So the idea that you don't know what sex it is when you're reading the rest of the question is going to be an impediment to interpreting it correctly, especially if you're not a native English speaker and English wasn't your first language. That's an enormous impediment to success, I think. So I always like to recommend that you do that and really take it seriously, understand the age and the gender. I know this sounds like really obvious stuff, but if you don't learn what you should be doing with each question, you can inattentively assume that you're doing it, or think through the question, kind of like automatically not do it. Um, and even though you realize that you didn't do it, you wasted time not doing it, and then you had to go back and do it. So then this is the first sentence. This is the first sentence that ends with a period. So this is part of the first sentence. This is the part that tells you a little bit about who you're dealing with. And then this is the rest of the sentence that's going to tell you this person has diabetes, or this person is experiencing chest pain or shortness of breath. So you really want to understand that sentence. This is not a sentence that you can glaze over. This is not a sentence that you want to be quick about interpretation. So you glanced at one, you glanced at two, you did what I was talking about doing vaguely, right? Then you went to three and you visualize this person. You want to have like a visual image, like, okay, this is a 40-year-old woman. That you want to like picture the patient. And then you typify them on the basis of their presentation. This is a sentence that you shouldn't even leave this sentence until you understand what it's trying to tell you. So until you can visualize someone and have it say, um, um, have it really be obvious and easy to understand, like uh, what sometimes it'll feel like you're not interpreting the sentence correctly. Like it'll give you like five different symptoms. It'll say, oh, well, it sounds like they're having respiratory distress kind of symptoms. They're using their accessory muscles for breathing, but they also have like some um, joint pain and they're having some stiffness, and they have a fever. Okay, so I'm trying to picture all of that, and I'm not really sure why, they're having diarrhea too, and it's watery diarrhea. And so you're trying to like balance all of those facts in your mind and then answer the question. Well, a lot of errors come from not taking the time on the first question sentence and saying, this is a 40-year-old female who has, seven different presentation symptoms. And so you say, how would I understand this sentence if there's seven different symptoms? How am I going to hold that in my brain all at once? And the answer is, they're giving you all of those symptoms because they want you to draw the conclusion that this is probably like a viral illness, an upper respiratory tract infection, something like that. So they want you to typify that sentence and give it a category so that you're not constantly going, yeah, but what about the diarrhea? Yeah, what about the joint pain? What about the cough? What about the shortness of breath and respiratory distress symptoms and accessory muscles? So you don't want to be constantly checking each of the seven presentations, aspects of the presentation. You want to be characterizing it, and so you really spend a lot more on this time on this sentence than any other sentence. Then you go down and you use what you know about the question sentence, the answer choices, the age, the sex, the presentation to interpret this such that you are mining it to answer this question. So you go one, two, three, four. Then you slowly go to five. Reading through five quickly does not mean literally glancing at the words in five. Reading five quickly means always reading quickly does not mean glancing at the words that are in a sentence quickly. Reading quickly means interpreting quickly, and whatever that means. So you cannot skip parts of the question if you aren't 100% certain about an answer choice. So reading quickly means you don't move on when you don't understand something until you diagnose it as something that you can't understand and you have to move on from. Like if it's a word that you've never seen before, don't worry about it. Skip that. Keep going. Try to figure it out anyway. But if it's a sentence that you don't understand and it's mentioning content that you think is crucial to the question potentially, it's good to linger a little bit. So you want to read this quickly, meaning interpret it quickly. Because you're just mining it now. You're just saying, wait, does this, I just want to make sure this is a viral illness. Did they have any sick contacts? What are their risk factors for a viral illness? Are there more symptoms that would suggest that this is Legionnaire's disease or, measles or, really a respiratory disease would be like influenza. So, COVID. So then you can go to one again. You read the question sentence again, knowing all the things that you do, and at this point, you should have one of these answer choices in your mind and pretty well. So then two, if you don't know the answer, you go back to two, and you want to say to yourself, can I rule out any answer choices? Are any of these answer choices obscenely wrong, obviously wrong? So you go through and you right click them so you can strike them through. This is a really important step, obviously, that we skip all the time, and it should just become part of how you practice because if you don't practice doing questions correctly, I guarantee you are missing out on points. So you're missing points just for no reason. And it's not even about being smart or being good at test taking. Like generally, if you don't do this, you really will. You'll make a clerical error. It's a 7.5 hour exam. So once you've ruled out all of the things that you know that the answer choice cannot be, then you want to rule in each of the answer choices that you have left. So if I've ruled out two of the five, then I look at the three and I say, what do I like about these answer choices? What do I like about these answer choices? So list them from what the information that was provided, because what you're really doing is you're characterizing the question. You're saying, what kind of question is this? What are they trying to teach me? So you say, well, this answer choice suggests that it is influenza, and this answer choice suggests that it's Legionnaire's disease. But they've told me that this is a viral illness. So I like influenza because it's a viral illness. I know that, but I can't remember whether Legionnaire's is a viral illness. So I like influenza a little more because I know it's a viral illness, and and I'm question mark on Legionnaires. So that's a good enough reason as to start thinking maybe I'm going to choose influenza and move on. But if you have three, you want to talk about each data point from the text that reinforces your belief that that's the answer choice, because they are giving you hints in 5 and 3 and 4, right? So you look at those, you literally count the number of things that you like about each category. Um, and then you characterize the answer choices by information categories. So if one of them, for example, if you had a question um, that represents, like, let's say that this person was taking metformin and they had a really low GFR. So then you look at the answer choices, and one of the answer choices is something that says, oh, well, they have Kussmaul breathing. And another one of the answer choices says, oh, they have a stomach ache, but they also have a fever, and they have some sick contacts. So like that's another answer. That's a really long answer choice. But you might have those two answer choices. So you say to yourself, what does the fever represent? What answer choice, what learning objective would it be if that was the answer choice? Because each of these answer choices usually represents a question that you would see on another part of the exam that would be correct. So one of them represents diabetic ketoacidosis, and the other one represents, like, gastritis, bacterial, or what have you. So if you characterize them, then you can really quickly and easily decide that you don't want to go with the gastritis answer. You could read the text and say, I might want to go with that text, but you say that text represents a gastritis, and I don't like gastritis. If I put it that way, if I think about it that way, I can rule it out. So characterizing it, and then obviously choosing the right answer and moving on. So this takes a long time if you haven't done it before, but it saves you a lot of time if you're getting good at it, because you know exactly where to look, you know exactly where to go, and you wind up, this process becomes something that prevents you from rereading the question and going over the wrong thing to find the answer over and over again, and seeking help from the same person over and over again who has led you astray. So I hope that is helpful. That's how I do it, and I just want to reinforce that this is not the only way to do it, and that there's lots of ways to do it. That you should develop your own way and develop your own strategies and justifications for doing it. But if you do need a starting place, this isn't a terrible order to look at a question. So was that helpful at all? Do you guys like? Would you guys want more content where we talk about strategies more than we do content? I don't know if I'll do this in the future, but so Miriam, are you here? Miriam? All right, Miriam, I'm gonna put you in the waiting room just for a little bit. But I'm gonna see you soon. I'm not like putting you in timeout. I'm just like making sure that you're here so I can ask you questions and I don't forget and keep asking you questions. Um, so I'll see you soon. Ah, Helen's here. Okay. Um, all right, Helen. Hello. Are you here? All right. Helen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Oh,
you.
great. All right. Welcome back. It's been a while.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So remind me, where are you coming from, Helen?
Uh, I'm from India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So very welcome. I'm just finishing a kind of a discussion about kind of the like taxonomy of questions and what to look at when, or at least what I look at when to answer the questions in terms of strategies. So we'll post a video about this, and then so you'll be able to have access to this. But I was just we haven't started yet, so I have some new functionalities for the game to show you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to show you kind of the game itself. Um, so this is at borb.org. This is our website currently, and I'm just going to show you a quick cinematic while it loads up. Currently, it gives you kind of a message like you should sign in. That isn't the case. So I'm going to full screen it. We have the opening cinematic here. So the audio is off because I'm on Zoom and it's displaying it in a weird time. But this is the login screen here. So I'm actually going to I'm going to stop login. Real quick. All right. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to change the music volume here. So I'm going to make full screen. So here's the main menu. We've changed a lot. So one of the things that's going on is we're still in production. We're still developing. And so currently you can have access through borb.org. I'm just going to write that into the chat. Borb.org represents the real name of the game, which is Borborygmi. Does anybody know what Borborygmi is? This is a medical. Yeah. Do you know?
Is that an abdominal sound?
Yeah, exactly. So Borborygmi is like when your stomach rumbles. It's the onomatopoeia. So it's an abdominal sound. If you were to auscultate somebody's abdomen, you would hear Borborygmi, which is the singular, or Borborygmus, which is the plural. But the reason for that is there is a sphinx in the game's lore that is infiltrating your mind and asking you medical education questions by stopping time and riddling you. Because sphinxes tend to ask riddles. They're usually the gatekeepers to these other worlds. And so the idea is that his stomach rumbling after he's eating the embedded reality in the universe is asking you questions, medical education questions. So it's a very silly kind of beginning to the lore of the game, but that's the genesis of the name that we're operating under currently while we develop the game. But the idea right now is that we're taking donations. One of the reasons we do these lectures, in addition to wanting to do them because I enjoy them very much, but is to bring awareness to the game and let people see some of the functionalities of the game, and to potentially promote playing the game in early on, because we have only so much space on the server before we are taking donations, and the minimum donation to play as a reward for donating above $5, you get early access to the kind of prototype. And so we have 9,000 questions. We are able to save highlights and flagged questions. We're able to test step 1, step 2, step 3 exclusively, so you don't have to study some other exam while you're playing the game. and you can play multiplayer currently, so you can actually play with your friends on this game now. So actually, if anyone has donated and wants to jump on, you can actually join me in the game, but you have to tell me that you're going to do that before we start, because play single player if we don't have any takers right away. You have to stay the whole session, because then you have to help me like get from one stage to the next, because we need to both like confirm that we're going to the next stage. So I'll just show you around a little bit. There are game reviews, so there are game logs, which will show you. These are test games, so they don't have real answered questions, but these are some of the review questions. So if you were to go to Wilms tumor, for example, then you should find a Wilms tumor question, and you can see your highlights usually. So if I were to highlight this and then re-enter this question, I should be able to see what I highlighted, and so you can go back and kind of see what you thought was important. It'll tell you whether it was correct, what confidence was, what confidence you had when you answered it, some of the answer choices, and then it'll also give you the date and time that you took the exam, and some of the percentages of people who had. This should equal 100. So we're still in development. There's going to be bugs along the way, because it's an enormous undertaking to develop this, but we have enough functionality that we're able to play with you guys in real time, multiplayer, reliably enough that I feel that it's worth having a meeting. So that's one of the reasons that we've been waiting so long to get started and kind of meet with you guys. So I wanted to make sure that it was worth your time, and that we weren't going to have so many bugs that you would be encumbered by them. But welcome, B. Are you here? Your name's B in the chat, I think. So I'm just welcoming everybody. I say hello to everybody when we get started. B, are you here? All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put B in the waiting room, and just when their audio is coming back, you're more than welcome, very welcome. People have audio issues all the time. Just come back to us, and we'll join in with you. So we'll ask you some questions. So here we're going to get started. Does anybody have a preference as to what character we choose? We got some characters to choose here. It doesn't matter which. Nobody ever tells me what character we should play today. It's why don't we try a archer today? All this just group C. I'm gonna be super boring about it. Step 1, hardcore. So if we die, then the character will be gone forever, and all of its items will be gone, and its experience. So let's try not to die today. Does anybody have a donation and want to play multiplayer with us? It's a little cumbersome, because then you're answering your own questions while we play, but hopefully I'll keep you alive, and the group will help you. Just say so in the chat, and we'll accommodate. Chala, are you here? Chala? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Is it Chala? All right, we'll see you soon. I'm just putting you in the waiting room. You can just rejoin and let me know. Let Rowenda know that your audio's back, and then you're right back in. Don't worry about it. So let's get started. I'm going to do a solo mode today. Put this, hide this menu. Hide floating controls. Okay, so we're loading. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Marcelo. You're keeping us going. So what I should explain is we have weather now, and we also have time of day. Also have the date, and we have a little meter here that will tell you what time of day it is. Some of the ways that the game works is we have green action points. These are things which represent how much they basically represent slivers of time. And so if you have action points, you're able to move, you're able to speak, you're able to attack and use a skill. And so it's basically everything you'd want in order to enjoy the game and play the game effectively. And the way that you earn action points is you answer questions quickly, accurately, and with high confidence. If you were to answer a question with high confidence and you were incorrect, then you might even take damage. And so this is your health, and this icon represents an icon on the map here. So if I were to move to E2 from F2, I would need to click on the tile and then press S, and you can see that I'm going to lose an action point here as I go. And so now I have only 3 of my 4 action points. We're going to have a different system where it's like 100 action points, and different characters cost different amounts to use things. But so when I click the tile, you can see that it's telling me this is an embankment. When I click on D1, if I click on C3, it'll even tell me that this is fog of war, and I'm not able to see what is on this block. Eventually, we'll find icons that show enemies, and those are tiles that I should probably be attacking. But before I do so, I'm going to click Z, and I'm going to skill up some skills. So this should be a kick icon. It's not that it's a wrong icon, it's just we need some art for that. That is coming out very soon. And I'm just using these skill points, and now I'm pressing a hotkey. I'm pressing the number 2 to put this in the number 2 slot to use it. So we have 2 Bs. Okay, so now I'm going to add both Bs. Hello, B. Can you hear me? I think Chala's joining as well. B, are you here? Can you hear me? All right. So we're going to put kick in here. We're going to give B a little bit of time to work on the audio here. I know it's helpful to be in menu in the. So if I press Q, I can escape here. And now I'm going to use some action points to move around. So Rowenda, do we have a random person to bother and ask you assembly questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So.
All right, sure. Yeah. Let's start with Sieda.
Okay, all right. Are you there?
Yes, just a second.
Okay, no problem. All right, so I'll just explain also that when I click around, if I were to click this, it closes one of the eyeballs. This is a viewer point. If I were to click over here, now it's closing another eyeball. And if I click another place, then I lose all my viewer points and I can't click on the tiles. I can't look around. So that represents looking around, which spends time, which spends action points. And so I need to get action points to even know what's on that tile to engage with it and do certain activities. Sayeda, are we ready? Should I read it or do you want to read it?
Yeah, I will read it.
Okay, all right, let's do it.
It's still not visible.
Oh, okay. No problem. Can you see it now?
Still no.
Okay. I'm going to start reading it and you let me know when you can see it, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So, 63-year-old man presents the primary care physician for follow-up. He reports a slow and steady weight gain of 6 pounds over the past 6 months. Despite attempts to control his diet and increase his level of exercise, his medication includes pravastatin, lisinopril, and hydrochlorothiazide. On exam, his vital signs are stable. He is obese, BMI is 32, and his waist circumference is 43 inches. His physician is concerned about an abnormal fasting blood glucose and dyslipidemia. On further workup with oral glucose tolerance testing, the patient is diagnosed with diabetes. Which of the following associations is consistent with this patient's most likely form of diabetes? So I read that from beginning to middle to end, but ordinarily I would not. So I'll show you that on the next question potentially if somebody wants me to read. So are you able to see it now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'm going to pause it. Hopefully this works.
Yeah. So I think we can rule out E, unrelated to his obesity.
You're saying B or E?
E. It's E.
Yeah, the autoantibodies or the abdominal obesity.
Yeah, the obesity. We can just rule it out. I think so.
Yeah. So how are you ruling it out? What did you use to decide that?
Because the patient is gaining weight by the increased exercise, and also it doesn't make sense because now the glucose, when they say that the glucose fasting level is high, so it means that patient is having diabetes. So there is something related in the pancreas, I think, which is causing the dyslipidemia and glucose level.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like following associations is consistent with this patient's most likely form of diabetes. So which kind of form of diabetes were you thinking about?
I have no idea, but I think it's between B and A.
And A. I think those are really good answer choices. But I'm gonna push you to what are some I'm just gonna ask you questions to be annoying and let me know if you just want to get to the answer choice. But like what are some types of diabetes?
It's independent and independent. 1 and 2.
Yes, yeah. Insulin dependent and insulin independent. So those are two types. So there's type 1 and there's type 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is type 1 early onset or late onset?
It's late.
Late. Yeah. Actually, type 1 is a little earlier. And so type 2
Mm-hmm.
is like type 2 diabetes is the one that you're going to get like potentially if your diet is poor, it's a risk factor for it has enormous genetic components to it, but also diet can be a factor in developing type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, which is like pre-diabetes. So there's type 1, type 2, and type 1 has to do with like autoimmune destruction. Do you know what the autoimmune destruction is of in type 1?
No.
That's okay. That's okay. These are like diabetes questions. Like, I think when I was preparing for a STEP exam, I underemphasized diabetes. And I think diabetes is all over the exam. And it's so good to like see them over and over again and talk about them because it's super useful for the exam. So, like, type 1 is all about destruction of these cells in the pancreas. So, you think about the pancreas, it's the upper left quadrant, right? It's near the spleen. It's kind of like a handgun shaped kind of organ, and and it has beta islet cells, which are produce insulin. So the problem with diabetes, really fundamentally, can be you don't have to memorize it. You can think the problem with diabetes is I can't produce insulin um, in type 1 diabetes because it's caused by the destruction of beta islet cells, um, which produce and secrete insulin into my blood, right? And so, if I was unable to produce insulin, then I would be unable to keep glucose in my cells. And so I would have a problem where I have too much glucose in my blood. And if I have too much glucose in my blood, then I am potentially metabolizing that glucose and excreting it in my urine. So I'm going to have two things happen. I'm going to be urinating more because I have hyperosmolar urine because I have glucose potentially over the 200 milligrams per deciliter limit. I think those are the units, which is the threshold for overcoming how many transporters I have to keep it in my blood. And so I have glucose in my urine. So that's one of the reasons they call it diabetes mellitus, is because it actually means that your urine is sweet. and they used to actually taste the urine, which is really gross. But that's how they named diabetes, because you're urinating glucose from the beta islet cell destruction that is autoimmune. So that's why you get thirsty, is you're losing water that way, and then that's also why you urinate a lot. So the common symptoms are polydipsia and polyuria for that reason. And so that's type 1. Type 2 is potentially also autoimmune mediated, but that's a very detailed explanation for what type 2 is, which is like resistance to insulin, which is to say your body's not responding to the signal that is insulin. It has plenty of insulin. And you're not dependent upon insulin to cure type 2 diabetes for that reason, because your problem isn't that you aren't producing and secreting insulin. Your problem is that you are not responding to insulin. So that was a little bit longer explanation than I usually give, but I really like diabetes as like, I want to characterize it correctly. I don't want to memorize anything about diabetes, because there's so much biochemistry and things that you need to know that it's good to understand what the etiology of the disease is and the pathophysiology before you get into the details and understand the biochemistry, because the biochemistry is really brutal. And you don't want to flip the sign and be like, oh, glucagon is going to be high or low, and and make those mistakes. So in these answer choices, there's also gestational diabetes, which I would go into, but I don't think this person has gestational. So it's really between type 1 and type 2. And then there's a few other types of diabetes. And so which of these answer choices represents type 1?
It's the B1.
Yeah. So that's type 1 diabetes. But this person, how old are they?
63 years old, man.
Yeah. So like they have 6 pounds. They've lost 6 pounds. They've gained 6 pounds over the last 6 months. So you're talking about a change that happened over the last 6 months. It's probably not early onset. So which of these answer choices would represent like type 2 diabetes, do you think? This is a hard question.
Not A, not D, probably C.
So C, cell leukocyte infiltration. So that would be like an infection, or it could be that you have leukocyte infiltration. You're thinking like autoimmune, right? So you're thinking like maybe there's leukocyte infiltration, but I would put it to you that I don't think that that's the answer choice, because I think that the pancreatic islet cell, I think if you were to do a pancreatic like biopsy, I don't necessarily know that you would have leukocytes in your pancreas. So I could be wrong, but I don't think that represents the diabetes that we want to be investigating. So HLA, yeah, HLA class 2. Do you know any examples of HLA like class 2 diseases? This is a very detailed question. I'm giving you a lot of like hard questions right now, because I think diabetes is super useful, and it's hard to prioritize it when you're starting out to study, or if you're like thinking about high yield questions. Diabetes kind of falls to the wayside, but it is extremely useful to know. So HLA class 1 and 2, the best way to tell the difference, just on basic, is that HLA class 2 is named with 2 letters. So like, for example, celiac disease has a HLA that is like, I think it's DRQ. Is that right? So you have like 2 terms after the HLA. So the name of the HLA. So there's like, for example, there's an HLA 2-3, which would represent lupus, like systemic lupus erythematous. And so that would be like HLA 2 and 3. And so those would be HLA class 1, because they only have 1 letter, and so or number. And so HLA just talks about the gene that codes for your brain express kind of protein. I'm getting really detailed right now. I should probably just go for the, but in any event, strong HLA class 2 gene makeup is something that you think about when you're talking about transplants for livers and things like that. So it has to do with compatibility for organs and things like that, as well as determining whether it's a response to a bacterial or a viral illness. So I don't think about that when I think about what about abdominal obesity? Which type of diabetes would that represent?
Insipidus.
You what?
Diabetes insipidus.
Insipidus. Yeah. So diabetes insipidus is a little different because diabetes insipidus is about ADH. And so that has to do with like kind of water regulation. And so insipidus, the way that you remember it is like mellitus is like sweet. And then diabetes insipidus means like it tastes very boring, which is to say that the urine tastes boring, which is really bizarre. But insipidus is going to be urine that doesn't have sugar in it. So it's not like a sugar-mediated diabetes. The reason they call it diabetes is because you still have polydipsia and polyuria. So you're still thirsty all the time and you still urinate all the time, but it's not a sugar-mediated pathophysiology. And so abdominal obesity has more to do with like type 2 because it's like insulin independent. And so it's adult onset. And so you would potentially have obesity that goes along with diabetes type 2. And I'm just going to tell you that pancreatic islet cell amyloid deposition does happen. I think it happens more in type 1. But all the amyloid questions are really actually kind of high yield questions. And diabetes is one of a few different disorders like multiple sclerosis and things that cause amyloid deposition. So knowing all of that, I'm going to turn the timer off. I'm sorry, I really gave you a lot of, you've been a very good sport listening to all of these explanations and questions. So I'm just going to ask you, what do you think the answer choice is, and then we'll go over it.
It's B.
B. Okay. So all right. So what confidence are you?
It's yellow one.
Yellow. Okay. This is a hard question. I don't think it's B, but we're gonna see. Yeah, I think it's A. Okay. So let's look at the answer choice. So this was like legitimately a very hard question. So you can see that HLA class 2. This is not the answer, but has DR and then 3, which is 2 terms. That means it's class 2. And so you look at the learning objective here. They have an illustration. Let's see what that illustration looks like. So diabetes type 1, main symptoms, so Kussmaul breathing, polydipsia, polyphagia, lethargy, stupor. Smell of acetone. This is like a juicy fruit, like a rancid juicy fruit smell on your breath. And nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain. So you really see diabetic ketoacidosis more in type 1 diabetes than you do type 2. So that's why they're describing all of the kind of diabetic ketoacidosis symptoms. But this person has type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset, and it is associated with metabolic syndrome because it has to do with insulin resistance and not having enough insulin resistance that you are not responding to insulin as well. And you can kind of think of it like if you're eating a bunch of sugars all the time, which this is not the cause of diabetes 2, people get mad, but you know, there are genetics components. But if you did eat sugar all the time, you'd increase your chance of getting diabetes type 2. And you can kind of understand it like you're getting a tolerance for having peaks in insulin, because when your body eats sugar, it winds up producing insulin to lower your blood sugar and amongst other things, and mobilize less sugar in your blood. And so you get a tolerance where you don't have as many receptors for insulin, and so you wind up having a resistance to responding to insulin. And so the answer was pancreatic islet cell amyloid deposition. So this is something that is in association with type 2 diabetes. So learning these amyloid depositing pathologies, I didn't believe it, yeah, but when I was studying for step 1, but these are very high yield things to know. So there's a page on first aid that's very useful that talks about amyloid deposition disorders. Transthyretin, I think it is associated with cardiovascular health and is deposited as you get older. There's AL amyloid. There's different types of amyloid, and it's really nice to get that hammered down. It doesn't take very long to learn those, but exposure to those and thinking about those as high yield is useful because they love those little details for some reason. Sayeda, thank you for going through that. I know that was a really long, arduous question, so I appreciate you answering my questions here. I think it benefits a lot of people because I don't think a lot of people knew the answer to that. So let's get back to the game. So what happened was we answered it and we had medium confidence, so we didn't get a ton of action points. So we want to get action points to move and see our environment. And it's nighttime, so there's a few more enemies and things at night. So Rowenda, do we have another random person?
Yes. Hi, Marcelo. It's your turn.
All right. Marcelo, hey.
Hi.
Would you like to read, or should I read the question?
Are you read it for me, please?
Okay, absolutely. So I'm going to admit this person. All right. And so, are you able to see the question?
No, I can see it.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Oh, not yet. Okay, I'm going to read it.
Not yet.
Okay, it's a little delayed, it sounds like. So, 43-year-old male is admitted to the hospital for a left leg cellulitis. He's being treated with clindamycin and is recovering.
I can see the question.
Oh,
sorry.
Good.
Okay.
Sorry. No, that's great. Just so people know, there's delay. So, I know that sometimes speaking, you don't even know.
No,
10 seconds. So clindamycin, recovering nicely. So he has left leg cellulitis. On the second day of his admission, a nurse incorrectly administers 100 milligrams of metoprolol, which was intended for another patient with the same last name. The error is not discovered until the next day. So at which time it is clear that the patient has suffered no ill effects of the medication, but is not aware of that error. What is the proper course of action of the attending physician? So I'm going to pause it here. So what are you thinking about first thing, Marcelo?
Well, this is a ethical question.
Great. That's a great answer, right? That's the category of question. Yeah. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So this is like maybe an like a adverse, iatrogenic, hospital caused,
Yes.
So this is like ethics, and it also has to do with like public health and safety kind of like parameters.
Okay.
So do you know different types of kind of characterizations of different errors, medical errors? Have you looked at that? This is like late in your exam prep that you prepare for this kind of stuff.
No, I can't remember.
Okay, that's all right. This is like
Yeah,
a lot of people do this very last. This is like the last thing they learn. It's really good to get.
But this,
yeah.
I think this question is more related to how a physician must to act in this kind of situations.
Yeah.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. I think you're right about that. Um, so reading these answer choices, are there any
Yeah.
that you like or dislike?
I will read it right now.
All right, no problem. So we have immediately disclose the error to the patient, which is to say, tell them that we made the error, let them know that the error existed. Then you have tell the nurse who administered the drug to notify the patient an error has occurred, which is to ask someone else to tell them. Then notify the hospital administration, but do not notify the patient as no ill effects occurred. So you don't have to tell the patient if there's no ill effects, says this answer choice. Notify hospital administration instead, and then you can prevent the error. That's what C represents. And then make a note in the patient's chart that an error has occurred, but do not disclose the error to the patient. So don't tell the patient, but write it down so that they know about it. The hospital being they. And then do not disclose the error to the patient as no ill effects occurred. In other words, do nothing. Don't tell anyone and don't write it down. So are there any answer choices that you don't like?
I think D.
D. So tell the nurse, right?
Yeah.
So tell the nurse. So if you tell the nurse who administered the drug to notify the patient of an error, are you?
I'm between D and E.
Yeah.
I know that the error has to disclose, I think. And
So if you know that, one of the things I like to do is just good housekeeping. I like to rule things out. So if you know that, I agree with you. I think we're gonna have to tell the patient. So like this one, do not disclose an error. We're gonna rule it out. We're gonna right click it.
yeah.
So I'm going to unpause for a sec. It's gonna take me a while. Okay. So I right click this, make a note of the patient's chart, but don't disclose. We're gonna rule that out. Do not notify. We're down to 2 answer choices, which is lovely. So what are some of the positives and negatives of D and E as you see it? Like, one of the advantages to telling the nurse is, as opposed to telling the patient yourself.
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, let's do this. Let's. I'm gonna take the pause off, and I'm just gonna. This is like one of those questions that's like really good. We'll learn it.
I think that the nurse must notify the error.
Okay.
But I think that like a physician, and I must be the one who must notify that
Okay.
patient.
Because you're like the attending, maybe it falls on you to explain it, even if it wasn't you who did it, because it's the nurse who did it, right? But you're the attending. So which answer choice do you want? And well,
E.
Okay.
E for me. I will go E.
Which confidence do you want?
The middle.
Middle. Okay. All right, you got it. Yeah, I think the point of that question is like exactly what you said, which is like, although the nurse did it, it actually falls on the physician. You know, if a medical error occurs anywhere along the pathway to tell the patient. So this is one of those questions that comes up. You don't know what they want you to do, but I think the way to remember it is to say, basically if someone's under your care and you're the physician, you have to do all of the hard work of telling them when things go wrong, even if you didn't cause them to go wrong. So so that's a good answer choice. I'm gonna flag this question just so I can show off the flag function later. And so thank you, Marcelo, for doing one of those questions, because I know those are not like medical education questions that you can like really show off your substantive knowledge in physiology. A lot of people are coming from med schools that didn't have American ethic, and they have like a different rule where they are, so they learn a different medical ethics as well. So I appreciate your answering those questions. So we got an action point out of the deal because you got it right. So we're gonna go. Maybe we'll go down and investigate whether there are enemies. So we found an enemy. Here's a snake. Okay, so so Rowenda, do we have another person to answer questions?
Yes. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Hello, Helen. Okay, all right. So do you want to read or should I?
Yeah, I want to read.
All right. Okay, let's do it. Can you see that?
No, I can. Yeah. Now I
we
can.
got it. Okay.
A 30-year-old man is diagnosed with a multi-drug resistant tuberculosis after a recent trip to Eastern Europe. After drug susceptibility testing is completed, he is given a regimen of antibiotics as a treatment. He returns 2 weeks later complaining of decreased visual acuity and color blindness. Which drug of the following is the mechanism of action of drug that is most likely to cause this side effect?
All right. So what are you thinking about first?
So he's diagnosed with a TB and he got the side effect from the drug.
Yeah. So do you know which drugs, especially on step 1, they're usually referring to one of 4 drugs. It gets more complicated in step 2 a little bit, but in step 1, there's like 4 drugs that they usually give for TB. Do you know some of them? This is good.
I know now, I cannot recall.
Yeah, we're like simulating the exam because we put you on the spot, and then all the anxiety causes you to forget everything you know, which is just like the real exam. But yeah, so I'll give you a hint, okay?
Yeah.
So the mnemonic for the tuberculosis drugs is RIPE. So each of the drugs start with those letters: R, I, P, and E. So can you think of any? It's okay if you can't. This is a hard question.
I for isoniazid.
Isoniazid, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
I
one.
for isoniazid. R for just E for ethambutol.
Exactly. Ethambutol. So
P for pyramid.
Exactly. Pyramidazole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once it gets
And
above,
R.
and R is. You're doing great. I'll give you an example. This drug is. Yeah, you got it. This drug causes your urine to turn orange.
Yeah, I read this so many times.
That's okay. So also this drug is a prophylactic drug that you would give to someone. So if you knew that they had gonococcal infection or gonococcal, specifically meningitis, then the contacts of the person that was sick would receive this drug, which is rifampin, as a prophylactic for sick contacts. They're not sick yet. They're not symptomatic yet. But just because they have exposure to someone who had meningitis that was caused by gonococcal infection, gonococcal meningitis, then they will receive rifampin as a prophylactic drug. And so rifampin is the R in RIPE, and these are the 4 drugs that you use to treat tuberculosis infections. that are like symptomatic, like like acute on like you're all of a sudden like you have like respiratory illness and you have fever and you're coughing up blood, or many different symptoms of tuberculosis. But so knowing what you know now, that rifampin, isoniazid, pyrimethamine, I need help pronouncing that word, and then ethambutol are the 4 drugs of tuberculosis on step 1. Which answer choices represent which drugs, if you can? So these are adverse effects these are mechanisms of actions of the drug. These are not the adverse effects. These are the mechanisms of action.
I think isoniazid is the A. Not sure.
I think E is going to be rifampin.
E is inhibition of RNA transcription.
I actually think E doesn't represent any of the drugs, and C is rifampin, but I could be wrong, because I think rifampin has to do with polymerase, RNA polymerase. I could be wrong, but I think that's right. And so, mycolic acid synthesis. Do you know which drug that is?
It's isoniazid.
I think you're right. And then ergosterol formation in the transmembrane channel. That's like a antifungal. And tuberculosis is a bacteria. So I think that maybe it also, I want to say, I don't want to speculate anyway, because I don't want to tell you something that isn't true. But I think that C would represent rifampin. So do you know some of the adverse effects of isoniazid and ethambutol?
I think ethambutol can decrease the visual acuity. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so ethambutol it might have like some visual symptoms, you're thinking.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yes.
So now, if you're thinking that maybe, so are there any other drugs that you think that the answer might be?
Isoniazid.
Isoniazid potentially. So, all right. So let's rule out some answer choices. If we thought A was isoniazid, then maybe we're going to rule that in. And C and E we liked. And then D, we're not so sure which drug that represents. I think it might be the P for pyrimethamine, pyrimetazole. So I'm ruling out these, not these, these. So now I'm gonna turn the timer off, and we're gonna choose one of the answers, and then we'll go over it. So which do you want to go with?
A.
E, okay. All right.
A.
Oh, A. Okay. So this is the isoniazid answer. So I think this probably represents ethambutol. So I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk about it. But which confidence do you want to go with?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. All right. We have a very yellow day today. Yeah. So this is ethambutol. So ethambutol is really famous for red green color blindness. But it can also cause just visual acuity dysfunction. So we'll see. Let's see what the review says here. So ethambutol and its pyrazinamide is the drug that I was trying to pronounce terribly. But you can see that it is rifampin, or you can also use rifampin as well. And then, so you have RIPE, right? Rifampin or rifampicin, isoniazide, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. So ethambutol is famous for having red-green color blindness. But if you see color blindness on an exam and somebody has tuberculosis, you should definitely think, well, maybe he's on ethambutol and he has some visual acuity adverse effects of the drug. So if we characterize these answer choices, rifampin inhibits RNA synthesis. So that would be answer choice D. And so pyrazinamide inhibits fatty acid synthesis and RNA translation. So we're talking about RNA translation with pyrazinamide. I'm curious what ergosterol, so this is amphotericin B. So I was right that this is amphotericin, which is for fungal infections. It is not used for treatment of tuberculosis for obvious reasons, because ergosterol is a component of the cell membrane of fungus, and it is not a component of the cell membrane of bacteria. And so then isoniazid inhibits mycolic acid. So you're absolutely right that you named 3 of the tuberculosis drugs. You named the one that we were trying to get. You knew that mycolic acid synthesis was the mechanism of isoniazid. So you can see how, although you know a lot about this, even when you're nervous, you can still get it wrong, because these questions have like 3 questions built into them. So if you don't know all 3 of the answer choice, if you don't know all 3 of this tertiary questions, internal questions, then you're going to get it wrong. So one of the things our question bank's going to be able to do is give you 3 questions. And it's going to be able to ask you, what were the 3 tertiary questions that you needed to be able to answer? So soon we're going to have a functionality that it will be able to provide you with that information so that you can break it down and understand what you didn't know. But it can't do that yet. The adverse effects of isoniazid would be something like B6 deficiency. So you'd see like peripheral neuropathies. And so because with B6 deficiencies, you can also get B12 deficiency, like symptoms. You can also get like kind of like glove and stocking distribution peripheral neuropathy. And then you get sideroblastic anemia and systemic lupus erythematosus so it's saying systemic lupus erythematosus, but I think what it's really saying is drug-induced lupus. Isoniazid can cause drug-induced lupus. And so this is the drug. I remember I said rifampin can cause red-orange body secretions. So if you give a person rifampin, make sure you tell them that their urine's going to turn orange, because you're going to scare the patient. They might even cry orange. They can even sweat orange. So their body secretions can be orange. So I hope that helps, Helen. I think that was kind of a hard question, because they're asking you 3 at the same time. So sorry for explaining that for a long time, but I think it's a really good question. So Rowenda, do we have another person ready?
Yes. Hi, Chala. Let's try.
Yeah, let's see if Chela's here. I think we tried Chela a little earlier. We got a bug here, so we're gonna fix that art for the text that's coming in for the log. But Chela, are you here? Okay, Chala. So I'm gonna put you in the waiting room. No hard feelings at all. I'm just making sure that people can respond, so that everybody's confident to respond. B, are you here? I know you joined several times. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna put you in the waiting room when your audio visual stuff. You can talk to Rowenda if you have an issue, and we can even think about accommodating you if you kind of let us know that what the deal is with your audio visual. So we might go again. I think everybody's going to get a second chance here, as well to answer questions. So Rowenda, who do we go next? We have a small group. Yeah,
Marcelo again.
Okay.
Saida is at hospital right now.
Thank you
She
for
have
answering.
a shift.
Okay. Thank you for answering questions. I hope it was okay to do that in hospital. So Marcel, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to open it up a little early because I know it's just so you have time to read the question along with me.
Yes.
So let me know when you can see it, because we don't have a large group. I'm just going to wait.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay,
You
good.
can go ahead.
All right. So, 62-year-old woman. Would you want to read it, or should I read it?
No, read it.
Okay.
You read it, please.
Okay. So, 62-year-old woman presents to her primary care physician for annual checkup and says that she has been feeling fatigued recently. So I'm just going to say, like, what I would ordinarily do is I would scroll down to the bottom. I would read the answer. I'd read the question sentence. Which of the following findings would most likely be seen in this patient? Then I would read the answer choices, and I would characterize them as these are like histological findings for what might be cancer or some kind of pathophysiology that has cellular descriptions. And it seems to be describing lymphatic tissue quite a bit. But I'm not sure, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. So I'm going to go to the top. So it says 62-year-old woman. She has fatigue. She can't think of any particular trigger for her symptoms that attributed to getting older. She's also excited that she has been losing weight, but denies changing her diet or exercise habits. So she has also says that she has been having some discomfort in her right breast, but has otherwise been well. She drinks socially and has smoked 1 pack per day, so she has a smoking history. Physical exam reveals a finding shown in Figure A, so we'll show Figure A in a second. Based on these clinical findings, a biopsy is obtained and examined for histology. So we now are thinking about histology of the breast, and we look at this photo here. I'm going to pause as well. So what do you see in this image here?
I can see the image.
Okay, I'll wait for you. I paused it a little bit.
Okay. Exam reveals the findings based on this clinical. Oh yeah.
Do you see the image?
Yes, I can see it.
So what is this? Do you know what this is kind of called?
I can't remember the name, but I think it's. I know the name in Spanish, but I can't remember it in English. It's like
Okay.
orange.
Yeah.
Orange peel, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So the term you're thinking of is peau d'orange, because it looks like an orange.
Yes.
Do you know? There's a few like characteristics that make the orange appearance. Do you know what those specifically will be? Because sometimes what they'll do, Marcelo, is they'll like I really don't like that they do this, but what they do, instead of giving you the eponymous name or the name description, they'll describe it in words to throw you off without giving you an image. So I like to talk about how you would describe this in words. How would you describe like what you're seeing?
Well, I can see that the skin is a little thick, and I can see dots on the skin, and the nipple is inward. I think.
Exactly. That's awesome, man. So you got nipple retraction, maybe nipple retraction.
Nipple retraction. That's.
And then you have these pores. One of the characteristic things of peau d'orange are these pores that are really dramatic. So you like see these like holes, like the peel of an orange. So you're way on the right track. Do you know the pathophysiology of peau d'orange?
No, I can recall.
Okay,
I can remember that.
I'm not going to give it to you yet because I might give you the answer choice, but we'll talk about it.
Okay.
All right, so that was very, very good. So we unpause. So now the timer's going. And I'll read some answer choices. So we have order of cells organized in rows. So we might talk about what that represents. Distended lobules without basement membrane penetration. Okay, lobules. Then we have dermal lymphatic invasion by tumor. Okay, so that's lymphatics. Then we have fleshy cellular and lymphatic infiltration. So this is like fleshy and cellular lymphatic infiltration as opposed to dermal. That would be skin. And so, or skin tissue. And then we have small glandular and duct-like cells with stellate morphology. So this is a hard question, man.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I hated breast cancer during step one because there's so much to know. There's a lot of cellular, and it's so useful on the exam to know it that you have to learn it. But the best way is to go to, I think the best way is to go to step one, first aid, and look at the anatomical picture so that you know the different areas. So you know the ductal area, you know the nipple area, you know the glandulars areas, and you kind of typify the cancers on the basis of which areas they would be in, on the basis of what tissue they're derived from. And so then you look at the histology and you talk about the pathophysiology in your mind to kind of understand it. So if you had to characterize A, how would you characterize A?
Uh,
This is a hard question.
I don't think that the correct answer is A, because it's talking about cells, organized cells. So this image that we have seen, it's more related with cancer.
Yeah.
With
Disorganized. That's really good. That's a good test taking strategy. I think for cancer, the word organized is usually incorrect. I think that's definitely a good way to do it. I don't know if this is what it's referring to, but I know that rouleau formation, which you can occasionally see, is when red blood cells will be organized in kind of a string. Rouleau formation is a blood disorder related histological finding on blood smear. So I'm not sure if that's what they're getting at, but so I think that organization is a great way to rule that out. So I right click that and we'll see that that's ruled out in a second. So then distended lobules without basement membrane penetration. Do you know what that might represent?
I think there is a basement. I think there is a basement membrane penetration, because when you see this image, that means that it's bad. So
yeah,
it's not like a carcinoma inside. It's invading the more than the basement membrane. So
yeah. So
I rule out that.
You're absolutely right. Powder orange is like a sign of some really, like, it's not a good thing to have. It's like, so I'm not sure if you know what kind of cancer is associated with powder orange, but do you know which kind of cancer is associated with it? Or
I can okay. No, I can remember.
We'll talk about it. But I think you're on the right track in terms of penetration.
Okay.
But also the location, right? We're talking about the lobules. And so we'll talk about the anatomy of the breast as well in terms of just like the parenchyma of the breast, because the lobules are a very specific location. There's only so many cancers that can come from the lobules. And so then dermal lymphatic invasion by tumor. So you have the dermal lymphatics, and then you have like lymphatic infiltrate, right? So those two answer choices have lymphatics in them, making the question harder. And then you have small glandular and duct-like cells with stellate morphology. So it's really down, I would say it's down between C, D, and E, right?
Yes, I will go for C.
All right, C.
Dermal lymphatic by tumor.
Now, I think we're talking about inflammatory cancer of the breast. And powder orange is, the reason you get nipple retraction is because you have lymphatic flow obstruction. And so did you choose E?
Small gland water.
Which
I
one?
choose. I chose C.
C. Okay, which confidence do you have?
Middle.
Middle. Okay,
Middle.
let's do that. All right, we got it. So let's read up on that. I think that's maybe that one's not at the tip. So we have inflammatory breast cancer. We said this is peau d'orange. It's a French spelling and everything. But you're right that it's like it looks like an orange peel, and it happens
Yeah.
because the skin. You can see how much the skin is affected, because from the picture, the skin is unbelievably affected. It looks like it looks like the pores are ready to like. They're like enormously expressed pores, and so the dermal lymphatics wind up getting obstructed and kind of pulling the skin out, and then the nipple gets retracted because it's like a balloon. If you were to pull on the skin of the balloon, then it would pull like the part where you tie the balloon off inwards, and that's how I think about it, because it's structurally kind of pulling the breast out. And so inflammatory breast cancer, you're absolutely right. You were remembering that it's like it probably will infiltrate the basement membrane because it's like a bad cancer. Its prognosis is terrible. It's like
Yeah.
50% survival rate over the 5 years. Yeah. And so why wasn't it the lymphatic infiltrate? I would say that would be the next question. Now that you know how peau d'orange is kind of formed, you say, why is this not lymphatic infiltrate? So you look at C and you say, well, this represents medullary carcinoma. So you can see how these answer choices represent other questions that you could be asked. So this represents, for example, lobular carcinoma in situ. Well, that would probably express itself in the answer choice with like blood coming out of the nipple. And it's usually non-palpable mass. And then medullary carcinoma would have soft and fleshy mass. So we had in this question peau d'orange. It's probably not soft and fleshy. It's probably more like feels like a tight, thickened skin with nipple retraction. And so then on 5, we have small glandular duct-like cells, stellate morphology. This is like more infiltrating ductal carcinoma. That would also have blood coming out of the nipple. More likely, infiltrating ductal carcinoma will have blood coming out of the nipple than lobular carcinoma, actually. And then firm rock hard mass. This is also a cancer to be very careful to identify in a patient that might have breast cancer. So that was a great answer and great like reasoning. I think that was like really good test taking reasoning to talk about the organization, and then also you knew a lot about that answer choice as well for peau d'orange. I know it's hard. Like I can't imagine taking the USMLE in Spanish, for example.
Yes.
So you're killing it in terms of that for sure. I'm gonna kick this snake, which is gonna spend 1 action point, so that I can shoot it. Because in order to shoot it, I'm gonna check my range here, and my aim shot only. I need distance shot. So Rowenda, who would be next to answer a question? I guess it would be Helen.
Yeah, Helen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Helen, are you there?
Yeah. I'm here.
All right, so I'm gonna let you read. I'll just we know the drill by now. So this is okay. Can you see it yet?
Yeah. The drug clostazole is known for its ability to relax vascular smooth muscles and therefore cause a vasodilation through its inhibition of phosphodiesterase 3. Given this mechanism of action, what other effect would be expected?
So, right, what are you thinking about?
Inhibit angioedema, vasodilation.
Vasodilation. So angioedema, if you were to smooth muscle, right, is part of what keeps your vascular tone. So you could get edema, which do you know what edema is technically speaking?
Um,
Like
it's a
what is it? Like
it's
if
a
you had
it's a leakage of from the capillaries. The
exactly,
imbalance between,
exactly. You said it really perfectly because it's the capillaries that are leaking when you have edema. So edema is really coming from, if you're talking about vascular edema, you're talking about the microvascular is becoming dilated or is allowing the flow of fluid, not blood necessarily, but fluid from the blood to leave the vasculature, and that is exactly what inflammation is, and that I should say that's what inflammation is, and then edema is a consequence of inflammation. Sometimes you get edema from you know, glycosaminoglycan production in Graves' disease, and if you have hyperthyroid from Graves' disease. But because the antibodies from Graves' disease actually activate fibroblasts and produce this material that you get pretibial edema, and that's not from vascular dilation. That's from fibroblasts producing glycosaminoglycans. But you, when you're talking about inflammation, you define inflammation like perfectly because it's the capillaries. So cilostazol is a drug that is dilating the vascular smooth muscle by and therefore vasodilating it. So you have the effacement of these like vascular cell lining cells, which is allowing inflammation. And the inhibition of phosphodiesterase is the cause, is like the mechanism. So what else does phosphodiesterase 3 do? Is kind of what they're asking. So this is like a category of question that is really technical, and it has to do with typifying different phosphodiesterase numbered receptors and where they are in your body to identify what would happen if you were to activate them or deactivate them. So, do you know what inotropy is? How would you?
it's a heart. It's a contraction of the heart.
Exactly. So contractility. So
Yeah.
inotropy has to do with increasing or decreasing the contractility of the heart, meaning the muscle contraction of the heart. So so then we have angioedema. Do you know what angioedema is usually mediated by? When we talk about angioedema, it's usually complement mediated. So it's usually like C3, C1.
Oh yeah, yes.
And so if you took like an NSAID, you might inhibit something that will produce, I think, produce C1. When you have a complement deficiency, you can get angioedema more easily when you take NSAIDs. And I'm trying to remember that pathway. I'm not going to tell you how it works because I need to review it. But if you have a complement deficiency, then so I'm not sure that phosphodiesterase is going to be related to that complement deficiency, but we'll talk about that later. So chronotropy, what is that?
That's the heart rate.
Yeah, that's the rate of the heart. And then antiarrhythmic action, you know what that is. And then increased left ventricular and end diastolic volume. So end diastolic volume, how would you describe what that is?
There's a filling of the heart.
Yeah. So diastole is the phase where the blood is filling the ventricle, right? Not the atrium, not the whole heart, but the ventricles. I know what you mean. So I'm just restating it. So the blood goes into the ventricle, and then at the end of diastole, when it's full, that's the end diastolic volume. So the good way to think about end diastolic volume is the amount that your ventricles will, like the maximum amount that your ventricles will have before it contracts. So this is like the amount of blood that it has to work with when it comes to producing cardiac output, right? So we have a lot of heart-mediated stuff. So is there any drug that we know about that affects cardiac things that is mediated by phosphodiesterase? One of the drugs that actually does this is for erectile dysfunction is Viagra. And so one of the things you can't do when you take Viagra is you can't have, like, if you have a recent MI, you can't take Viagra, because you can potentially give yourself like coronary steal syndrome, where you're dilating coronary arteries. And you can wind up giving more blood to places in your heart that already have blood, and then denying certain places that don't have blood flow, which can worsen your ischemia if you have like an MI or angina. And so I think we just need to answer this choice, and then we'll read the explanation, because I'm not entirely sure what the answer is. So which answer choice do you want to choose? At what confidence are you thinking, Helen? This is a hard question.
Maybe just maybe C.
All right, let's go C. And what confidence do we want to go?
Yellow.
Yeah, let's go yellow this one. Okay, so it's A. So it's inotropy. So it's contractility that we're talking about. So we're getting attacked by this snake, but he's not doing very much damage here. All right, so let's look at this. So they're going to give us the adenylate cyclase. So this is something that you really should pay attention to for step 1, is which drugs are adenylate cyclase-like drugs, cyclic AMP drugs. Every adenylate cyclase drug is a cyclic AMP drug. So adenylate starts with A, AMP starts with A. It's not a coincidence. AMP means adenosine monophosphate. Adenylate has to do with adenosine. Like they're named the same way. It's like glandular, but it's not from your glands, but they're named the same way. So adenosine and adenylate are like beta 1 mediated drugs, deal in cyclic AMP. So they affect adenylate cyclase. Phosphodiesterase is one of the things in the pathway. So let's look at this pathway. So we have sympathetic nerve releasing noradrenaline or norepinephrine, and which is the same drug, same thing. And beta 1 is being activated, which is coupled to a G protein receptor, right? And so this is a G protein receptor, beta 1, and then it's going to release cyclic AMP effectively, because it has a G protein that's going to signal to adenylate cyclase to convert ATP to cyclic AMP. And that's going to cause cardiac muscle. This is cardiac muscle. What type is cardiac muscle smooth muscle?
No.
No, right? Smooth muscle is a different category. We have smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and then we have somatic muscle, right? So somatic is voluntary, they say. It's not necessarily the best way to think about it, but then you have smooth muscle, vascular tone, peristalsis in your gut is smooth muscle mediated. Usually it's, it can be rhythmic, and it's usually involuntary, unconscious decision making goes into contracting those muscles. And then you have cardiac muscle, which is usually on a timer and has a threshold for contracting a certain frequency. And so if you have a phosphodiesterase 3 mediated drug, it's going in here and it's converting cyclic AMP to AMP, which is a different conformation of the molecule. And it actually prevents cyclic AMP from doing what it does best, which is activate contraction. So phosphodiesterase 3 inhibition would prevent your reduction of cyclic AMP. And when you prevent the reduction of something, you increase it because you're not reducing it anymore. And so the best way to answer this question is to think through, okay, let's see, beta 1, G protein, adenylyl cyclase, cyclic AMP, contraction. So you draw that out using letters. So you write in beta, G, A, C, and then contraction, you just put a plus sign. And you note that this is in the cardiac muscle. So you literally write it out in your mind or on a piece of paper, and then you write in what phosphodiesterase 3 would be doing. You literally need to write this out. If you don't know it, it's awesome to write it out and then test yourself. Be like, can I write this from memory? Because you need it. You're going to have to write it out. It's really annoying, but every time you see this, go through your mind and just say, every time I hear that a cardiac muscle is being contracted, I want to think about cyclic AMP being activated from the G protein coupled receptor. Just associate that. Just be like, when there's a contraction in the heart, I know that cyclic AMP is being increased because I know how adenylyl cyclase works. And then that will help you with these very persnickety detailed questions that have to do with phosphodiesterase E3, which is reducing cyclic AMP by converting it to adenosine monophosphate, right? Which is part of the salvage pathway, and you can talk about the biochemistry later. But cyclic AMP is going to activate contraction. So that's what that means. And each of these different muscle types have a different location in your body, as well as histological location concerning the nerve and where the receptor is. So these are like questions. They're really detailed, and they get you a lot of points on the exam because people don't study them as much as they should, and they come up all the time. This is how they know that you studied enough to pass you on the exam. So it's stuff like this that at your home institution, they didn't emphasize it because it's not something that doctors necessarily are doing in their head every day. But you still need to do it to pass the exam. So, and I like it. I like knowing it because it helps me understand drug, interactions and things like that. So, is that helpful? I don't know if
Yes.
this, I
Yes,
think
yes.
this is like a
This is much
super,
helpful.
okay, good. Okay. And also just for fun, I mean, you're going to see cilostazol a lot. Sometimes they're going to want you to know the mechanism of action. Getting a question like this really helps to remember. Like, I think cilostazol is a hard drug to remember the mechanism of action of. So I think this is a good opportunity to be like, I got that question wrong when we were in a video, and so I'm never going to forget cilostazol's mechanism of action ever, and just make it like a thing that you remember. So I like that question because I think there's two things to remember that are really good, which is that cilostazol is a PDE inhibitor, and that whole mechanism with adenylyl cyclase and things are just really helpful. So awesome. So, all right, we got to kill this snake. So, Rowenda, who do we have next? So Syed I think is in hospital, so that's a perfectly good reason not to.
Yeah, I can hear you, but
Oh,
I
good.
cannot say anything.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna read it, and then maybe the only thing you have to say is like what answer choice you want. Does that work?
Okay, hi,
Yeah, sure.
AK.
Yes.
Guys, I have to leave you because I have to work.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for coming. I hope to see you again.
No,
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome. See you soon. Bye.
See you. Bye.
So we can go back. We can go. Helen, we're gonna go to Saida, and I'll just read it out. I'll think about it a little bit openly. This is a good opportunity for me to show you kind of my test taking strategy real quick, just because that's the theme of today. So what I would immediately do is say which of the following hormone levels is likely to be within expected physiological range. In other words, which of these is not affected by the thing that I'm looking for? So that's how I would immediately. I haven't seen anything yet, but I know that these answer choices are what they are because I need to diagnose something that will not affect them to the extent that they'll be outside of normal range. So these are all things I also noticed. These are all things that are in the pituitary, except for aldosterone. So that are mediated by things that are in the pituitary. So I'm thinking about that whole axis: hypothalamus, pituitary, genital, or hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. So 29-year-old patient. So it's a 29-year-old. Okay. So presents to her primary care. So this is a female. So, I'm thinking about Sheehan and things like that. I need to know that her gender and her age, or I'm not going to be thinking about the right risk factors. So primary care physician with persistent amenorrhea and inability to breastfeed over the last 5 months. She says that she has been very tired since her baby was born with fatigue. So she has fatigue syndromes. And she literally recently had a baby. We just talked about Sheehan syndrome. I don't know if you know the pathophysiology. So you can understand that. I just read the question, the answer choices, saw that her age and gender was what it was, and thought that it might be Sheehan. Now, it might not be Sheehan, but now that I know that she's talking about having a baby recently, the Sheehan pathophysiology is that the pituitary enlarged during pregnancy, and then when you have the baby, the decrease in certain hormones will cause necrosis of the pituitary and decrease in certain hormones as a result. So deal with cold weather. So she's having trouble dealing with cold weather. That gives me the impression that this might have to do with the thyroid gland. She's gained 5 pounds. It sounds like hypothyroid to me. It reveals that she has had a vaginal delivery and that was complicated by severe hemorrhage. So that is the pathophysiology of Sheehan as well, is not having enough blood supply to enlarged pituitary. So episodes of hypotension. So which of the following hypotension? So which of the following that goes with hypothyroid as well as aldosterone? So hormone levels is likely to be within expected physiological range. So, Saida, I gave you a lot of information. So,
Yeah, exactly. So
do you
it's A.
do you have an answer choice you like?
Yeah, it's A.
You're saying A?
Thyroid hormone?
Thyroid
Yes.
hormone. All right. Okay. Yeah, I think I said thyroid like 7 times. So I see why you're saying that. But it's saying which hormone level is likely to be within the expected physiological range. In other words, thyroid hormone would be normal if we chose thyroid hormone as the answer, which I don't think is what you mean.
We can go with the prolactin also.
Prolactin. So prolactin would be, I think prolactin would be normal range if you didn't have a prolactinoma and if you didn't have Sheehan syndrome. But prolactin is excreted by the pituitary. And if I'm suspecting Sheehan, I can't choose prolactin or thyroid because TSH is produced by the thyroid and prolactin is produced by the thyroid. So is FSH produced by the thyroid?
No.
It is. It is. So we're talking about the anterior versus the posterior pituitary. So the posterior produce things like oxytocin and growth hormone, I believe, and so and ADH, and then you have the anterior pituitary, which produces FSH and TSH and prolactin and CRH, which is like a cortisol signaling pathway. And then, do you know how aldosterone is signaled? What is the pathway that aldosterone is part of?
It's a positive feedback.
Yeah, so you get positive feedback from what?
From the hypothalamus and then to the adrenal glands?
I think so. So the way that I categorize aldosterone is I call it, it's part of the RAS system. Do you know what the RAS system is?
Yeah, renal angiotensin.
Yeah. So it's renin, angiotensinogen, aldosterone.
Aldosterone.
Yeah. And so it goes from the kidney with the juxtaglomerular cells producing renin in response to low sodium. And then it goes to angiotensinogen, which is produced, actually, it goes to ACE. It goes to angiotensinogen, which is um, a mediator that will signal in the adrenal glands for the production of aldosterone. And so, if you're either hypertensive and you're not perfusing enough blood to your renal circulation, or if you are hyponatremic, then it will try to retain sodium through the signaling of aldosterone. So that pathway is like super kidney and adrenal. So we're not thinking hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, or gonadal. We're thinking like the axis that is renal and adrenal. So just identifying the body, where in the body aldosterone is mediated, helps us to understand like whether it will be within normal limits. Now, this patient is hypotensive occasionally, but they're not hypotensive right now. So I think the reason they're having amenorrhea is they're hypoprolactinemia, meaning they're not producing enough prolactin, but they're probably not producing enough FSH either. That could cause amenorrhea as well. They're not producing thyroid hormone probably because they're not producing TSH. And they're probably not producing enough cortisol because CRH would signal the production of cortisol. Corticotropin and then corticotropic releasing factor, I think it is. And so which answer choice am I alluding to?
It's E.
Yeah. So this is like a good, like, kind of like almost like endocrine anatomy. And like which organs secrete which thing. Although this is Sheehan, you have to kind of identify this is probably Sheehan. You also need to kind of identify, another way to do this question is to say, they're having thyroid issues. Hypothyroidism could cause amenorrhea, but they just had a baby. And they're kind of hypothyroid. So I think that we have the right answer with E. So I'm gonna give the high. I know you're in hospital, so I can't be asking you a ton of questions. Sorry, I asked you a few. But we got aldosterone. So I think that's what they're gonna say the reasoning is. I want to kill this snake, so I cheated a little bit. But thank you for working through that, because I think that's a super high yield, important question. And it's not easy, I think, to necessarily decide what we're dealing with. But this Sheehan syndrome, hypovolemic shock during delivery, and so you're just kind of typifying what is in the pituitary, because the pituitary is becoming necrotic from not receiving enough blood, because it was receiving enough blood while she was pregnant, but then when she got pregnant, when she actually had the delivery, that circulation received less blood, and also she had some hemorrhaging and things like that caused her to be have low blood from her vaginal delivery. And a confluence of all of those factors caused the pituitary not to receive enough blood and become necrotic. And that's why you have a decrease in the release of hormones. So categorizing this question is so important, because you can make the argument that if they're hypotensive, their aldosterone is going to be outside of normal limits. So you really need to know that USMLE likes to test you on the anatomy of the endocrine glands and what is going to be secreted by what. And so this is a really good, like, high yield way to understand these questions. Is they're usually going to ask you, like, concerning location, what is going to be amiss. That's a really common way to ask it. So I'm going to kick this snake, and then I'm going to shoot it with a bow, and we killed the snake. So this is the dead snake. It's very, very sad. So, but he was attacking us. So I think it's Helen.
Yes.
Is anyone
Yes.
else here? Are we, it's just us, right? I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anybody going to Helen, but is that right, Rowenda?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So it's Helen's the next.
Yes, right.
Okay. All right. Helen. All right. Let's do it. So so I'll queue up the question. Let me know when you can read it.
Yes. A researcher is studying hypogonadism in men. To this end, he measures serum levels of total and free testosterone, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH from 10 volunteers with a hypogonadism. Which of the following choices in a figure A accurately describe the role of LH and FSH in the male?
Right. So I'm going to show you the image before I ask you what you're thinking. So this is a ton of very fuzzy imaging. So we have axon Leydig cells, Sertoli cells, synthesis of testosterone, increases in synthesis of inhibin. Obviously, this is a hard question. Increases growth factors and supports spermatogenesis. So I say that obviously this is a hard question, but they gave you so much information. And I think the way to think about this is the more information, the better. You're going to use that information to choose the right answer choice. So the more information they give you, the more hints you have to rule out answer choices. So just when you see enormous charts like this, or you like have a ton of text, just like immediately just relax and rule things out on the basis of what they're telling you, because it's actually good. It means that you're probably going to get it right. So it just looks like you're probably going to get it wrong because it seems like you have a million things to choose, but you don't. You have 5 answer choices and you have a million things to use to choose one. So let's read the question again, then we'll come back to the image. What are you thinking about first here?
I think follicular stimulating hormone to the spermatogenesis in men.
Yeah. So which of these two hormones affects the Leydig cells? Hello, Chala?
Yes.
Chala, are you here? Chala?
Chala have a internet issue, Dr. Katz.
Okay. Chala, can you hear me? Okay. Can you wave to us if you can hear me, Chala?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Hello?
Thank you so much. So Helen, thank you for joining us, by the way. I'll talk to you in a second here. So LH, FSH in men. So LH is going to affect the Leydig cells, right? And FSH affects
Yes.
kind of the Sertoli.
Yeah, Sertoli.
So let's look at this figure here.
So
you came up with that on your own. So I don't know how much to tell you because I think you're gonna have maybe have,
LH.
yeah. So let's do it one column at a time. Let's just break it down. So like, which of these acts on Leydig interstitial cells?
That's LH.
LH, right? So we can rule out
third.
we can rule out 1 and 2 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So which acts
And
Sertoli? So
FS,
that's no help to us.
FSH,
Yeah.
FSH, yeah.
And so now we're using these 3 to decide which of.
Testosterone,
Yeah.
that is LH. LH increase the testosterone.
Great.
And
Inhibin.
increase the growth factor. I think that can cause FSH2, the increased synthesis of inhibin.
I think you're right. So
And FSH increase the growth factor to support spermatogenesis.
yeah, you said that already. So you actually were going to get it right even without this. So you could have gotten it right without even knowing anything about inhibin. But I think you're right that FSH is the mediator that affects inhibin. Let's check. But I think you're on the right track. So which answer choice do you want if that's the case?
4.
Yeah.
4.
So what confidence do we want?
The blue one.
The middle one?
No, the last one, blue.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
blue. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. We got that one. That was a great reasoning there. So they didn't give us an image. I would have liked a description of this, but basically you're right. So we go to 4, and it turns out that FSH mediates inhibin. Do you know if you have high inhibin, do you have high testosterone?
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't increase your testosterone necessarily or decrease it. I think it might even decrease it a little bit. So it's like inhibin is a negative feedback for high FSH, basically.
Right, yeah.
And so we'll read about it a little bit. So luteinizing hormone acts on Leydig cells, increases testosterone synthesis, and follicular stimulating hormone acts on Sertoli cells, which increases the synthesis of inhibin and growth factors that support spermatogenesis. So let's read a little bit about inhibin, just because I need to refresh my memory on how it affects. So increased synthesis of inhibin, which provides negative feedback, like I was saying, to the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So I would even call this hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which they don't go into very good detail here yet for the synthesis of inhibin. We're updating our QBank pretty soon, so I'm talking trash about some of these questions. But Sertoli cells to increase the synthesis of inhibin, which provides negative feedback on the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So it's probably going to decrease your estrogen, decrease your testosterone. But if somebody wants to look that up and let us know, I'll give you credit when I read your chat, and appreciate it. But thank you, Helen. I think that was a good question. And now we can move and pick up these gloves. It's cold out. I'm going to put some wool gloves on, and I'm going to here, and I'm going to search this snake's dead body. Now that I'm standing on the snake, it's very morbid. So then there's a scholar robe. So I can walk over to this scholar robe and pick it up. But I'm going to go to my inventory, and we're going to equip some gloves here. So it tells me, actually, if I move this over here, it tells me that these gloves I require. I'm not smart enough to put these gloves on. It's a shame. So I'm going to drop it because I don't want to be holding it, because I have a weight requirement for how much weight I can carry. So these are my stats, and we've updated the stats. And there's all of these amazingly detailed stats that we have now, including your mental health. There's even a psyche aspect, evasion, all sorts of things. So I'm just showing you how elaborate the game's getting, and how on basic we have gold and all sorts of different mechanisms. So next week it'd be cool to play with somebody if somebody wants to do multiplayer. You can even attend the step 2 sessions and be in the video as a teammate, and you can just answer step 1 questions in multiplayer with me playing while I answer step 2 questions with the group. Next, we would have Marcelo, but I think he had to go to work. So let's go to, Saida. Should I ask? I'll read the question. I'll just ask you the answer. Does that work? Shala, are you here? I think Shala might have stepped out when I noticed his video. um, but I think he's just having connectivity issues. It's not like he left on that account. But Sayeda, if you want, I'm just going to read the question out, and you can type into the chat. You can say something in the chat if that's what you want to do, or we can give Helen another question here. I just want to complete one stage before we go, but it's 15:17. We started. So we've been playing for quite some time now. So it's 2 hours now. So let's make this our last question. We can do it kind of as a group, and everybody can kind of chime in. Do you guys want to try that? That sound good? So everybody can turn their mics off, and we'll just try it. So 78-year-old man, emergency department complaining of severe new onset crushing chest pain, started 30 minutes earlier. Blood pressure and heart rate's pretty reasonable. His cardiogram is shown in figure A. So I'm going to read the answer choice, actually. Which of the following is the mechanism of action? So we're looking for a mechanism of action, and we notice this is definitely a heart problem, a heart question, or a cardiovascular question, given these mechanisms of action. So he says figure A is the electrocardiogram. I want to see that right away. So this is fuzzy. It's not always, these images are going to be much improved soon when we upload them to a different storage area. But you can see here that you have ventricular hypertrophy. And it's kind of in the middle. So I would still call this left ventricular hypertrophy, given that V2 is large and so is V4. But we're not seeing necessarily ST elevations here, because it would be QRS this is QRS, and then T is here. This is the T wave. So S would be between T and Q in the Q wave, in the R wave. So you're not seeing those elevations here, but you are seeing peak T waves, almost as if they had hyperkalemia, which is what you would see if you had hyperkalemia. You'd see peaked T waves. So catheterization lab, a drug-eluting cardiac stent is placed in one of the coronary arteries. Afterwards, the cardiologist recommends that he takes clopidogrel for 1 year. Which of the following mechanisms of action of clopidogrel is the mechanism of action? Do you guys know the mechanism of action of clopidogrel? I don't, for example, think that it's a direct thrombin inhibitor. Helen, do you know the some of these answer choices? You might not like them. Do you like B? What does B represent?
It's the pathway, cyclooxygenase pathway.
It's what?
And prostaglandin pathway.
So I would say that it's not the renin pathway so much. So this is a mistake I make. So the ACE is not part of the RAS system. Renin, angiotensinogen, aldosterone is the RAS. So cyclooxygenase would be part of like the arachidonic acid pathway.
Yeah, that's why I'm NSAID. I'm saying NSAID.
Oh,
pathway.
That's what you said. Oh, sorry.
NSAID pathway, yeah.
Oh, so this is my mistake. Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, so arachidonic pathway, you said NSAID. So you're absolutely right. NSAIDs, aspirin. It's probably talking about aspirin, right? Because it would be an irreversible binding to cyclooxygenase would be the mechanism of action of aspirin. And aspirin is a cardiovascular drug. So that's why I say it's probably aspirin, because if you had a stroke or if you had a MI, aspirin would be one of the first things that you'd want to give, as well as a home drug, aspirin. So Um, but we're talking about clopidogrel, so it's probably not B, right?
Mm.
Do you know any phosphodiesterase inhibitors? Do you know any drugs that are phosphodiesterase inhibitors? Helen?
Well, that's
You what?
thiazide. No,
No. It's the drug. It's the drug from the question we just did.
that is clostazole.
Cilostazol. Exactly.
Clostazole. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're never gonna forget it.
Yes, clostazole. Yeah.
Cilostazol. So do you know what
Mm.
number cilostazol is? PDE inhibitor. It's PDE 3.
PD3. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and then how is it mediated? So like what pathway is it? Is it cyclic AMP or is it cyclic GMP?
Cyclic MP.
Right? And
Yeah.
so
Yes.
if you had a beta 1 drug, would it affect adenylate cyclase?
No. It's yeah beta. It's if I have an alpha, then it will affect beta 1.
Beta 1 will affect adenylate cyclase. So the way to remember this is to go to first aid,
Yeah, beta 1.
and
Yes.
they have a mnemonic for remembering which receptors are adenylate cyclase mediated versus which receptors are cyclic GMP mediated or what have you. So there's a page in first aid that is irreplaceable. It's like super useful. All of these questions are on it, and it tells you the receptor and the pathway. Like, is it adenylate cyclase? Is it cyclic AMP? Or is it like cyclic GMP? So that'd be like guanylate cyclase. And
Right.
and that page is like, you should just be able to write the whole page. Like, it is worth memorizing. I know that it's really annoying, but if you memorize that page, you will be so thankful for first aid, because you'll see it over and over again. You cannot pass the exam without it, and it's just an annoying thing that people do right at the end of their prep because they're like, they don't want to do it. But if you do it right now, you will be thankful for it. So this is cilostazol. So this is not clopidogrel. So let's say that we're pretty sure that that's not the answer. So what is an ADP receptor antagonist? What is a good example of that?
I think that is clopidogrel.
I don't think so. I think this might have to do with ADP has to do with like
That's nitric oxide.
you what?
Nitric oxide. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so nitric oxide has more to do with like cyclic GMP. So ADP receptor antagonist would be like I'm trying to remember the drug that does it, but do you know what adenosine does to platelets? Adenosine winds up.
Adenosine work on a I think it work on the. I'm not sure.
No, that's okay. That's okay. This is a very like molecular biology question, and super like detailed in a way that like med schools usually don't care about that. And so this is trying to get to the bottom of like, did you study specifically for the USMLE kind of question? Adenosine is so like, I'm gonna like throw a bunch of facts at you just because there's gonna be a video and you can watch it. But like, adenosine is one of the things in the pathway. So like, what happens is you get like an injury on your vasculature, and it reveals like collagen, and that collagen is then bound by von Willebrand factor, and von Willebrand factor has a is then able to bind G2B3A on a platelet, and that's called like that's when the marginalization and like the which is to say the platelet like moving to the side of the vasculature is like allowing platelets to like bind to the plate site of injury, and that's the receptor that would like bind there. And so then you have like these other receptors that are like G2B1A or yeah, I need to remember the exact numbers, but it is then it is a receptor on it is a channel or receptor on the expressed on the side of the platelet that are intended to aggregate the platelets together, and those receptors are expressed as a result of the release of ADP. So ADP will be released, and then G2PY receptors will bind to ADP, and then the expression of these other receptors will allow for platelets to bind to one another and create a clot. And that's how you create clots. That's why your bleeding time is increased when you have low platelets. And so I hope that is like the context. That's the context behind clopidogrel and aspirin and all these things in terms of the molecular pathway. And so Glanzmann disease is like a deficiency in G2B3A. And it's very similar to the effects of clopidogrel. So I think the answer is E. So let's try to, I'm gonna, after 662 seconds, I got it wrong. You got it right. I'm sorry. So I think it must have been the wrong of the incorrect of one of the two types of receptors. So excuse me for, you got it right here. So prasugrel is also known as ADP receptor blocker, and is more potent than clopidogrel. So you know what ADP does because I just explained it. And so clopidogrel is going to prevent the aggregation of platelets, because it's going to prevent this receptor that's on the side of platelets that allows platelets to bind to one another, and not the collagen, not the von Willebrand factor, but to one another. So that's how you form the clot. And so it prevents clots from forming. And that's useful for people who have crushing chest pain, because this is probably a myocardial infarction, which is caused by a superimposed clot over a intimal tear, probably caused by LDL cholesterol, or probably taken advantage of by LDL cholesterol that is accumulated within an intimal tear, and allowed for a clot to form on the outside of it. So that was a really long-winded answer to the question that I wound up actually misallocating clopidogrel to a specific receptor, but I think I am correct in the pathway to producing the clot, and so it's a nice like learning opportunity. It's good for me to review it a little bit as well. But I hope that helped anyway, even though I got the question wrong. Thank you for sticking around. We did like 2 hours here. Just for video purposes, I'm just going to talk about. Usually, we would get to the end of the stage and kill 2 enemies. In the first stage, I think it's almost always killing 2 enemies. Then you go on to the next stage. It tells you how many things you killed, how many questions you answered correctly, and how many questions you were given. And then you also have the options here to mute the music and return to the main menu. And so if you quit, you return to the main menu, you go to your game review. And you can go to your game logs. And down here at the bottom, we got 4 out of 8 questions correct. And so this is Group C, Step 1 on March 31st. And we can go to this antiplatelet drug that I got wrong and see why I got it wrong and highlight it. And it will remember your highlights from the question, but we didn't highlight the question. And so you can see how you're just basically using a QBank, but you can do that in multiplayer, playing with other people, and the game will become fun enough to justify playing for many hours with your friends, and even competing against your friends. You can fight your friends and kill them. And you can flag questions and reference them there. So it's a really kind of an educational tool. We're also going to have a lot of features like that can specifically cater to the reason you got wrong and give you an explanation that is really catered to you. And we're going to have things that allow the QBank to really be special. I can't divulge exactly why, but it's going to be a nice thing. So thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we can have as many people as we had today next week, and have a Step 1 course. I'll see you guys soon, and just remember, if you donate above $5 in Ko-fi, you can play the game whenever you want with friends now. It's kind of a new release, much further along, much fewer bugs than we had before, and we're really getting somewhere now. So we're going to be adding a lot of features, a lot of fun things to do in the future. So thank you, Helen and Sayeda, for joining us, and everybody thank Rowenda for organizing. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.